Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Investment Hub. We're about to start the theme Attracting Investment, and I'll just hand you over to Remy Piat, your moderator for the first session. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining me to what I believe is an essential panel on the question of putting together a global fund that would supercharge investment in the mining sector, something that is dearly needed and would actually answer a certain amount of needs from mining companies and some of the host countries in terms of developing mineral resources. And we have a very distinguished panel here, which I think is very interesting because we have a mix of people from the region, from outside, members of sovereign wealth funds, of public entities, of private sector. We have especially Christine Coignard next to me, who's a director of a series of listed companies, especially from Future Mineral Solutions. We have Farid Habib, senior director of the industrial and mining sector from PIF. We also have Issa Baluchi from Oman, manager of the economic diversification investment of the Oman Investment Authorities. We have Tim Reid, chief executive officer of the UK Export Finance. And last but not least, we have Gareth Penny, chairman of 91 Group. So these actually, distinguished speakers will, together with me, address that question of whether or not the capacity of creating a global mineral fund would help supercharge investment into which goal. And to do so, without further ado, maybe I'd like to turn to you, Christine. You have experience being on the board of directors of a series of different companies. You worked with investors in the banking sector. Could you maybe help me set the stage here of what is needed, what we talk about the global mineral funds, and to which objective, maybe?
Well, it's a very high objective, maybe not achievable immediately, but over time. And to be successful, I believe that a global mineral fund would need to, first of all, have a significant firepower. Yep. So money to allocate where it wants to allocate on its own, but also together with partners, and the ability to bring in other global finance providers, starting with the multinationals, the development agencies, the public sector, the private sector, and all the extensive tools that are already in place worldwide but completely underused and that can apply to mining finance. The second thing I believe is that they would have a lot more impact if they participate at the project level or at the mine level, not at the board, not at the ownership level of the mine. And why? Because by doing this, they can be active partners in making it happen. That's one, and also they can be on several sides of the table. They can come in as investors, they can come in as lenders, they can come in an off-taker, and as such, they must find ways to combine these different priorities and interests into something that is in the interest of the project. Mm-hmm. I think they need to have the ability to come in at all stages of financing: exploration, development, production, expansion, and to really target, the short term. We're talking about the urgencies of bringing in production. The short term impact is on expansion, then development, but to shoot at the same time on all these different stages, meaning that the fund will need to have the ability to provide all the type of mining finance that we know: equity, royalties, debt, ECA financing, and so forth and so on. Another, I think, important point, it would need to have the ability itself through partner funds to finance what's around mining. Okay. Infrastructure, education, energy, water supplies. And last but not least, to be really successful, it will need to be highly profitable, meaning properly allocate money to increase the amount it can invest in the sector over time, and therefore having even more of an impact.
Before we wrap to Farid, we mentioned that potentially having a larger collaboration on the funding would actually lead us to have an investment-driven sector that would set the tone for the answers to the need of energy transition. Do you actually want to address this, of the importance of having this alliance of funds and investors to set the tone?
Well, it's been largely discussed in the main room, but we all come to the conclusion that mining is not just a hole in the ground. Mining is a lot of things that need to happen at the right time to make it successful. And there are all sorts of issues. It's a very fragmented sector, meaning we all need to work together and be aligned around the same objectives. Mm-hmm. And this is within these partnerships that a global mining fund could have real impact in bringing the people together, aligning the people together, and again, working in the interest of the project.
Thank you, Christine. Maybe Farid, I mean, obviously everybody knows here that PIF and Ma'aden put together Manara Resources with a very interesting mandate of being able to provide the needed inputs for the energy transition and the development of the country. From your experience of being a senior director of investment, what is the success that you've seen? What is still to be done? What are the lessons that you've learned and what you're trying to look ahead?
Oh, sure, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I would like to approach the topic from a more focused perspective. And this will highlight the opportunities, but also the challenges from a regional context. So as you know, the region is home to some of the largest sovereign wealth funds, which are currently managing in excess of $4 trillion in assets. And those same funds have invested over the last 2 years in excess of $10 billion in the metals and mining sector, which represents 7% of the total value of deals globally in that space. And they're increasingly prioritizing this sector across their broader investment strategy. So with their financial strength and long-term investment horizon, they're uniquely positioned to address the challenges we're facing on the supply side, on building the value chains. Mm-hmm. So while the advantages are very clear, there are challenges, and which we need to address. So if I just mention a few of the advantages of pooling resources together, one of them is greater investment capability, so we can pursue larger and be bolder in our investments, for example, greenfield projects. The second one is we can leverage on each other's strength, either on the downstream or the value chains, to avoid duplication, and this will maximizing efficiency. The last one is risk mitigation. So by collectively investing, we are somehow diversifying the risk across participants. And also we have a stronger voice when it comes to mitigating country risks if we come together. Now, on the other hand, the challenge, and the main one, is how to align the diverting objectives between the different participants. Some of them are, they look at mining as just for financial exposure, mm-hmm. whereas others, it's really an integral part of their domestic industrial policy, or maybe a combination of both. And if it's if domestic investment, if it's a domestic investment strategy is a key consideration, the question now is how do you prioritize between different countries on who builds the value chains? Nonetheless, in the region, we had some successes. We have some precedents where governments came together and created entity to achieve a certain an objective. An example of that is APICorp, Arabian Petroleum Investment Corporation, or Arab Mining. This is an example where governments came together and pooled resources, and they have a clear objective. So the key success is really have alignment on objectives, a clear investment policy, risk framework, and then having the right management team. And this is what we really did at Manara. So PIF, Ma'aden came together. They agreed on the winning strategy, which is to take minority stakes in projects internationally to secure the offtake. And we have brought in a highly respected management team who are currently executing the strategy. So really, just to conclude, I think instead of focusing immediately on setting up a regional or global fund, maybe we should prioritize the collaboration between the different stakeholders. And this is really what Manara is currently doing, is pulling the different governmental agencies, the mining operators, the midstream technology providers, and trying to deliver on this strategy.
No, very true, very true. Issa, Farid was mentioning obviously that the region was home to many sovereign funds. Maybe Oman Investment Authority is maybe the one that has the largest, longest track record in terms of investing in the mining sector, but not only exploration, also transformation and midstream and downstream. Can you maybe share your experience and touch upon that elements of collaboration with other regional actors or national actors in Oman?
Yeah, sure, Remy. Can you hear me first?
Yes, perfectly.
Thank you very much. Maybe before we talk about Oman Investment Authority's experience in this field, I want to again speak about the bold change. The excitement in the mining market is a lot driven by the energy transition itself, which is a bold change in human history, I would say. That transition also needs a bold change in the associated links to it and enablers. Mining setting in the front seat of that. And of course, when you're talking about mining and at this scale, you need to do it differently. I'm sure the tradition way of doing the mining in terms of through the private equity or the mining companies, and then always different investment entities are being also part of it. This worked very well previously, and we reached where we reached today. But I think if you want to move faster, if you want to do it at a larger scale, because of the demand of energy transition, we need to do it differently. We have to think of a different model. And again, I emphasize what Farid and Christine about saying about the collaboration coming together, which bring all the stakeholders together, as well as the investors, and you try to align your interests together. I think that is the winning strategy in the long run. Back to our experience at the Oman Investment Authority, we have adopted the collaboration approach long time back, honestly speaking. As a government entity, we have been working with some other government agencies, with sovereign wealth funds, to establish joint venture investments, or JVs, what we call. We have these JVs with different countries, national level. They are, however, investing in different sectors at the moment, and maybe also their mandate is limited to 1 or 2 countries of these JV partnerships. For mining, I think we can think of something similar, but instead of a JV, it could be even more parties involved in coming together. So that's the supercharge investment should be there. On the top of this, I think if you do this, you have to do it only for mining, because the mining is very unique, and you need to be a little bit more patient in terms of your capital. And also going forward, I think it's not just about the financial return, as Farid was saying, that there are also some strategic elements may play a role. So bringing that also on the table and putting it also somehow into the model, I think that's also very crucial. We have done this previously at the diversified sector level, but I think for mining you need to be more focused. You have to do it for mining, and you need to do it with similar-minded people to do that. And I have, from my discussion with different worlds in terms of investors, I've seen already a trend of that, as Farid mentioned one. But you're also already seeing that a lot of people are also talking about each other and trying to come up together, national level, companies level. And even if you look at the private equity companies that are active in mining, you see the traditional LP, JP's approach for some of them at least started changing. You see the LP also putting on the table not just the return aspect of it, but also they are asking for something more than that. It could be an offtake, it could be something else that feeds into what they're actually looking from the strategic elements. And you see the private equity already adopting something different. So we're seeing that change, but I think that's something that perhaps we can talk each other more, and we need to emphasize more on it to make it happen, because energy transition needs that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Issa. Maybe turning to you, Tim, and I'd love to see what role that the public finance institution from outside of the region, could play. Originally in that panel was supposed to have someone, Hamid Rashid from the United Nations, that wanted to talk about the importance of carbon credits for exploration, different tools that were put in place. I know the European countries have maybe a strong experience of trying to have, kind of the incentives from public finance institutions to be able to develop different sectors. I wanted to know, especially in the case of UK export finance, how can export credit agencies play a role in facilitating that kind of coordination between public finance institutions or others to help for the development of critical mineral projects specifically?
Great, thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here in Riyadh to talk about this important topic. I think just by way of background, the UK Export Finance is the UK's export credit agency. So by definition, we're looking to try and grow the impact of the UK supply chain on projects, in this case on critical minerals projects around the world. But our job here is to try and crowd in capital, to crowd in private sector capital. It's not to compete with private sector capital, it's to do things that the banks or the other financial institutions won't do by themselves. I've heard a few words here today that I think are really important to reflect on, and the first one that came up time and time again at the plenary was impact. And everything we do starts with that. Every investment proposition we take to our credit committee starts with an impact assessment. What impact are we going to have, both on the UK economy, but also on economies and communities overseas? And then I've heard other people here talk about risk mitigation and collaboration. And I think collaboration, it's why we're all here. No one institution can fix this by themselves. So when we look at critical minerals, one of the things we've done is we've expanded our mandate, and our government announced that we will be able to, while our principal role is financing exports, we will in fact be able to support overseas critical minerals projects, either where there is UK content, so exports, or where those minerals can help the UK supply chain, imports of critical minerals. So expanding that product range to help develop products around and projects around the world. So for this works in the form of guarantees or direct loans. Most of what we do is guarantees. So we're in essence changing the risk profile for the commercial lenders, enabling them to take risk that they might not be able to take before. And when we look at critical minerals, it's across the value chain. It's extraction, processing, refining, manufacturing, recycling. All of those are within our remit. And you might ask, why are export credit agencies a good fit? And I think there are two things here. Firstly, that we've got significant capacity. So tens of billions of pounds of capacity in emerging markets around the world to help with these projects. And we can do mining projects up to a tenor of 22 years. So significant tenor to enable these projects we know these are not short-term projects. They take time to develop for the cash flows to start coming through, so we can lend for time. We're also bringing best practice. So I've also heard a lot of talk about ESG while we've been here. We do things to the highest standards. We think that's important so that projects that we're doing we can be proud of today, but we can also be proud of when we look back in 10 years' time. And I think that's really, really important. But it's important to note these are not our standards, these are international standards, standards that we're all trying to adhere to. We talked a little bit about infrastructure. I think export credit agencies have for years been able to develop critical infrastructure, roads, hospitals, ports, renewable technologies. All of those are required, one of the other panelists said this, in developing critical minerals projects. It's not just about getting the minerals out of the ground, it's making sure you've got the critical infrastructure to deliver that. I talked about de-risking. What we can do is we change the risk profile. If a bank is lending to a critical minerals project with a UKEF guarantee, they're in essence taking UK government risk, and we're taking the risk on the project. So we're changing the risk equation for commercial lenders and other players in this market, which I think is really, really important. So I think I'll leave it at that for now, but lots of different things that we can do, which I think helps crowd in the private sector, helps change the risk profile, and hopefully enables all of us to develop on some of these projects around the world.
Well, thank you, Tim. Gareth, I'm going to give you the huge responsibility of tying all these down. 91 is quite active in frontier jurisdictions, emerging markets, phenomenal with equity, with financial mechanism. How do you work with potential sovereign wealth funds or export agencies or financiers? And where do you think that your role could be in terms of helping bridging that gap in financing and participating into a multinational super fund for the mining sector?
Thanks, Remy, and good afternoon, everyone. Remy, as you say, 91 is a global fund. We have $180 billion under management, and we deploy that capital not just in the mining sector, but across a whole range of different opportunities. But because of our South African roots, we started in 1991, we've been around for over 30 years. Much of the emphasis originally was around the mining community, and as you say, Remy, we are still very much an EM, emerging market focused business. So a country like Saudi actually is very much kind of middle of the fairway for us. We do emerging market debt, we do emerging market equities, and we have, of course, a range of other products that we offer. Interestingly, about 40% of our business is either generated or deployed capital in the African continent. So it's a part of the world we feel very comfortable in. We have offices and business right across the African continent in many, many countries. And so for us, I think what we see in Saudi is an extension of doing business in an area and in a way that we are very comfortable with. Which really brings me on to the second point that I want to make. I think it is fascinating and deeply encouraging to see what is happening in Saudi. I've been impressed by the Future Minerals Forum. I came last year, I've come again this year, and what I like about it is I think it's bringing together a lot of the senior decision makers. It's trying to focus on getting things done, on deliverables, not just talking about things. When you look at the presentation that the minister just gave us, that's really impressive to see a lot of those numbers and how quickly actually the runs are being put on the scoreboard, or the goals in the net, if you like. So I think Saudi is doing a lot of right things. I think they are putting in place a ecosystem for mining that if we then project that forward 5, 10, 15, 20 years, it's going to be successful. And the third and last point I want to make is, if you look at the region and you say, how do we superimpose a lot of what we've heard from our colleagues on the panel, how do we superimpose ideas of kind of a global fund? I think there are three elements that you need to successfully have in place here in Saudi if you're going to adequately fund a growing mining business. The first one is you need a really active, successful junior mining sector. Typically around the world, if you talk to a lot of the big mining companies, you look how many of their projects have originated from junior miners. A lot of you will be sitting here in this audience. It's a critical element. And I think what Saudi can do is learn a lot from places like Australia and Canada. They've both done it extremely well. They don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are certain tax ways in which this can be done that are very incentivized. And I think to have a highly active junior mining sector that, say, can list here on a secondary market and that can get the kind of multiples that already Saudi companies are enjoying will be a very important way of providing capital to companies that are doing things that probably aren't mainstream financeable at this point, because they're going to go out, they're going to do grassroots exploration, they're going to take a lot of those opportunities that have already been generated by the ministry, work that's been done in looking at the Nubian Shield, at how exploration can be driven. So that's first element. I think the second element is, how do you then find finance for, let me call it the middle tier, the people who kind of aren't grassroots, they found something, they've probably got a bankable feasibility study, they now need to, it's not just single digit millions, they're now looking at tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions to get things really going. And that's, I think, a really interesting question, and it's one that 91 is thinking very deeply about. My colleague George Cheveley is sitting in the corner there. He runs our global mining funds, and we're thinking hard about how do we create the instruments that we could deploy or be the kind of middle financier in a market like this. And I said three elements. The third is the big mining companies, the Glencores, the Anglos, the Ivanhoes, the Barricks. I mean, those guys are raising international capital. They've got big projects, big mines all over the world. I think Saudi's successfully attracting them here. They're all here at the conference. And you need this ecosystem if you're going to be successful in financing mining funds. You need the small junior players who can find ways of raising relatively small amounts of capital, but very difficult to raise because they are extremely high risk, early stage projects where many of those opportunities, don't materialize. They probably don't quite reach the thresholds. They don't get financed. So you need high risk capital. You need this middle tier, and you need the big players. And I think actually probably that's the next horizon that Saudi needs to find a way and make sure are all properly in place.
No, thank you for those insights. Actually, Saudi did a great job working with Canada, with Australia on a series of collaboration, learning best practices of different provinces. But indeed, as you're saying, there's still a few steps to go, and it's a work in progress that has already been quite successful. I wanted to thank you again for your expertise. We're kind of caught by time here, but we had wonderful conversation preparing this panel, and I can only vouch for the quality of the human beings here on top of the professionals. So again, thank you for your expertise, and I'd like to ask you to join me to just show you grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.